Hi, it's Dwyer. It's gamblersadvisory.com, free site. bettingangle.us, a free site. Let's talk boxing, but first remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, I was wrong. Let me just throw it out there. I was wrong about the first Deontay Wilder-Luis Ortiz fight. Right? Wilder proved me wrong. I congratulate him. He exceeded my expectations. Going into that fight, I fully expected, and I said so here online in a video that's still up, I fully expected Luis Ortiz to take Wilder's title. I consider Luis Ortiz to be that dangerous. Now it worked out for gamblers because the hedge was Wilder by KO, right? When you're talking about Wilder fights, if you're not going to pick him, the hedge has to be Wilder by KO because that's what he does, right? I believe only two Wilder fights have gone the distance. His fight against Bermane Stiverne, and he KO'd Stiverne in the first round in the rematch, and his fight against Tyson Fury, and let's face it, Tyson Fury gets up at something like the count of 9. That fight was close to being a stoppage. For the record, I thought Fury was winning that fight. I thought Fury did win that fight, but I'll concede. Wilder comes within a second of winning that fight by KO. Let me also say, too, in reference to Tyson Fury, I know Vegas casinos think that Anthony Joshua is going to beat Andy Ruiz. I don't, but they do. Right? I know professional gamblers seem to feel that Anthony Joshua is an uncrowned heavyweight champion. That first fight against Andy Ruiz was a fluke fight. Right? Well, let me just point out the obvious here. Tyson Fury, in my opinion, is the toughest opponent either Deontay Wilder or Anthony Joshua has fought. Right? I would say that Vladimir Klitschko was the toughest opponent Anthony Joshua has fought to date. Right? I think the styles just mesh for Andy Ruiz against Anthony Joshua. But I feel that the toughest opponent he's fought was former several-year heavyweight champion Vladimir Klitschko. Just understand, Fury beat Klitschko. Well, if Klitschko were to fight Luis Ortiz, I think Luis Ortiz beats Klitschko. In other words, Luis Ortiz, to me, arguably, is as good as, if not better, than the fighters who Anthony Joshua has fought. I'll agree. Andy Ruiz, based on styles, at least my assessment of them, would have a good shot on Luis Ortiz. But understand, the odds in Las Vegas right now that have Luis Ortiz, even after his first fight with Wilder, a 4-1 underdog, a plus 400, are simply ridiculous. This is a very tough opponent. In fact, whereas I was confident before the first fight that Ortiz would beat Wilder, and he did give Wilder the toughest fight of Wilder's professional career. Right? The doctor hops in the ring at the start of a round. That's how tough that first fight was, to look into Wilder's eyes. Right? Ortiz comes within the doctor's judgment at that moment. At the beginning of a round, after Wilder has had a minute to rest from the prior round, Ortiz comes within that doctor's judgment of becoming the first man professionally to beat Deontay Wilder and of taking Wilder's title. Now, for me, this is an odds play, and by that I mean I don't know who wins the second fight. I just don't. This second fight is really up in the air to me. But that makes it easy to bet. The bet I'm recommending is to take the underdog, Luis Ortiz. I'm taking Ortiz a second time. Right? Plus 400, sign me up. The hedge is the same. Wilder by KO. Now, in my favorites folder, I have the video of the first fight. Now, let me just say this. Something happened in that first fight that changed history. It's the first knockdown of Luis Ortiz by Wilder. Now, let me explain, and let me give a disclaimer here. You know, I don't assess a fight by the scorecards of the judges. Right? We've seen them miss the boat completely in some fights. Most recently, the Inoue Denier fight, which was a barn burner in real life, but which was a lopsided fight according to the judges. I feel the judges got the scoring of the first Wilder-Ortiz fight wrong. If you look at the judges' scorecards, they have Wilder winning the early rounds. Folks, I'm just telling you on my scorecard, and that's the one I go by. Luis Ortiz swept the early rounds. In fact, dare I say it, in my opinion, Luis Ortiz in the very early part of the fight shows you the blueprint on how to beat Deontay Wilder. Folks, it's there on film. Right? Let me say this. Let's say I'm a boxer and I'm facing you. This is the left side of my face. This is the right side of my face. I'm going to hold up the paper here. Right? This is Deontay Wilder's hot zone. This is the part of my body that I have to defend. In other words, his right hand, he likes to throw it up top from distance. Sometimes, like against Dominique Brazil, it'll look like it's a short right hand, but if you look closely, he's stepping into the punch. Wilder likes to use length. He likes to be far away from you. So, if you're a right-handed boxer, you have problems because Wilder can counter you. Right? If you're a jabber and you're using a jab, right? Wilder can wait for you to throw the jab. Keep in mind, Wilder has a very long reach. Wilder's 6'7". Wilder will wait for you to throw a jab, then he'll throw the right hand right over it. Right? He's throwing the right hand this way. It comes in, it hits the side of the opponent's face. Wilder's not a gifted body puncher. Wilder, to me, is not gifted with the left hand. I know some people are going to pull up tape. They're going to make the argument that Wilder hits Bermane Stiverne with an excellent left hand. Right? I'll take my chances with Wilder's left hand. I'll take my chances with Wilder's right hand to the body. Right? Where Wilder gets you is with that right hand to the head. And because he's taller than most of his opponents, Tyson Fury was taller than him, but he's taller than most of his opponents. That right hand is thrown coming downward. Right? Wilder leans into the punch. He gets leverage on the punch. So understand, against a righty, that righty's going to be nervous to throw the jab because the jab leaves the righty exposed. Let's also talk boxing history. Right? To prevent punches from coming in on this hot zone toward their face, guys like Ken Norton and George Foreman would have a hand up. Right? Look at the film. Foreman with a great jab. I would argue one of the division's best jabs in history. still would have a hand up. The problem with having a hand up is that it kills some of the offense. In other words, I'm not as ready to throw my right hand if I have to use that right hand for defensive purposes. Let's face it too, the state of the heavyweight division is such that you don't have a lot of defensively blessed heavyweights. You just don't. Now, all of that is solved by Luis Ortiz early in the fight. Understand, Ortiz is a southpaw. He doesn't have the problem of tying up his jab hand. Right? He doesn't have the problem of having to worry about Wilder countering his jab. In fact, what Luis Ortiz does is audacious. Right? Let's pretend that I'm Wilder. Right? Luis Ortiz early in the fight. This is Wilder's left side. This is his power hand. This is his KO hand. Right? What Ortiz does is he comes in at 10 o'clock. He's over on this side of Wilder. You would think he's trying to smother Wilder's jab. Now understand, Wilder is not a guy who puts punches together. Right? This is the era we live in. Wilder's a specialist. Right? He's a fastball pitcher. He has an A+ straight right hand to the head. That's his secret sauce. He's not a guy who sets up that right hand by throwing jabs. He doesn't jab you into the right hand. That's not his game. So when Luis Ortiz is at 10 o'clock and at 9 o'clock, it looks awkward on film, those early rounds. Luis Ortiz has the upper hand. His jab hand is his right hand. So he's able to jab Wilder, right? He's not afraid of Wilder countering him with a right hand over his jab hand, which is his right hand. Right? Wilder isn't a fighter who, when his left is smothered, has the left hook to blast you back into the pocket. Because Wilder is flat-footed, Wilder doesn't make the adjustment well enough. So, right, Ortiz is over here. Wilder's not a fluid fighter who's up on his toes, who's going to naturally turn. So there are times in the fight where Wilder, who is low volume and cautious, seems a little bit baffled by how to stop Luis Ortiz, who's over on this side. Well, what happens is Ortiz has success. I know the judges are giving the rounds to Wilder. Whatever, right? Ortiz is having success. He's frustrating Wilder. Then he drops the blueprint. He ventures into the pocket. Folks, you don't have a margin of error with Wilder. So Wilder then drops him. This is before Ortiz's best moments of the fight. Wilder drops Ortiz. When Ortiz gets off the canvas, Ortiz abandons the blueprint. That was destabilizing Deontay Wilder. Let me say this too. Wilder's thin. Wilder's tall. Wilder likes to hit guys, we'll say, who are about this height. Right? Wilder leans in. He wants his opponents to be upright. If you can keep your head low, right? Think Joe Frazier. That's the style that beats Deontay Wilder. If you could keep your head low, just by having your head low, it takes it out of Wilder's power zone. Right? Wilder's not going to get the leverage on his straight right hand that he would get if you were standing tall, like Bermane Stiverne is in the rematch, and like Dominique Breazeale is in Wilder's first round KO of him. So Ortiz, early in the fight, has his head low and is over at the side. He's throwing jabs that Wilder can't counter because Wilder doesn't have the left hand to counter the jab. He's also throwing jabs to the body. Right? One way to take away a guy's power is to take away the guy's body early. That doesn't just sap stamina, that saps power. Because when the guy then reaches back for that big shot, his muscles are sore. It's like swinging a baseball bat when you're sore. Right? You're not going to hit the same amount of home runs that you would hit when you're not sore. Right? So just understand the paradox of this fight. Luis Ortiz has the blueprint to beat Deontay Wilder. Right? Wilder, I'm hearing in practice when he's sparring, is a different fighter. He's up on his toes. He has a jab. You saw flashes of that in the first Bermane Stiverne fight. But understand, Wilder's that guy who, if he's boxing you, he loses power. Right? He has mode A, flat-footed slugger. Then he has mode B, more boxing. But understand, in mode B, he doesn't have the power that he has in mode A. So where the intrigue comes in here is that Luis Ortiz isn't the athlete that Wilder is. Ortiz, if this fight makes it into the later rounds, Ortiz, in terms of stamina, might look as bad as Kovalev did as his fight with Canelo aged. Right? You can tell when a guy's getting tired. Ortiz, in an interview that's on BoxingScene.com from yesterday or the day before, talks about how he wasn't really knocked out in the first fight. He was just bone tired. Right? He claims he would have preferred to have been knocked out rather than have the referee stop it prematurely because he was tired. Right? That's his biggest enemy here. I believe he'll be able to dodge Wilder's right hand early. He was until something like the 5th round of the first fight. Right? I believe he understands. He understands that he has to smother Wilder's left hook. Just stay away from Wilder's straight right hand. Because Wilder doesn't have, right, great body punching ability. Because Wilder himself fights too tall, doesn't really know how to fight low. Because the feints throw off Wilder. Take a look at the Artur Szpilka fight, folks. Szpilka's outside, he's feinting Wilder. This is the same guy that Derek Chisora destroyed. Right? This is the same guy who lost to Babyface, the fighter out of Brooklyn. I can't remember his name right now. When he fought Wilder, he had Wilder baffled. Right? Because Wilder is a guy who looks at you and is trying to land a straight right hand. If you're not in position and if you're faking like you're going to throw a punch Wilder can counter, because that's what Wilder's banking on. It throws Wilder off. So what I want you to do is to go back to the Gerald Washington fight. Now understand, that's a seminal fight, for me at least, involving Wilder. I thought Washington is winning the early rounds. Washington comes in low. Now Washington's a tall man, but he comes in low against Wilder. Right? He's jabbing Wilder to the body. Wilder is low volume. Folks, the volume is too low, in my opinion, to win rounds. Unless the judges are just blinded by the fighter's fame. Right? Now understand, Washington in that fight, this is the same Gerald Washington who loses to Jarrell Miller later. Washington in that fight has a problem. He's right-handed. Right? So it lines up too perfectly for Wilder. When Washington throws a jab, understand, if Washington's a little bit higher, if he makes a mistake and leans upward, then that's an opportunity for Wilder to hit him right here. Right? Had Washington been a southpaw with that strategy, and rather than be in the pocket with Wilder, he could be next to the pocket against Wilder, still arm's length away, able to land a lot of jabs, he would have had a chance to beat Wilder that match. Luis Ortiz had that chance the first fight. Got reckless, stopped going to Wilder's body. Gets dropped by Wilder. When he gets off the canvas, Ortiz wanted respect. So Ortiz starts trading with Wilder, gets the upper hand, almost wins the heavyweight title. Right? The problem is, then he found himself in a firefight. Rather than be smothering Wilder's left side, staying away from Wilder's right hand, rather than shooting a jab, Ortiz has to increase his volume in the rematch. He has to make it obvious that he's winning the slow rounds. He needs to beat Wilder on volume. The punch to use is the right jab. Rather than jab Wilder, rather than get low, throw the jab to Wilder's body. Right? Rather than stay with that game plan. Instead, he gets dropped by Wilder after a great start. Right? The plane's in the sky, folks. It runs down the runway. It's up in the sky. Ortiz is at 30,000 feet. He's taking apart Wilder. Gets dropped in the fifth. Almost wins the title. Is tired at the end of the round. Has an angry Deontay Wilder in front of him. And then tries to trade with Wilder from the pocket instead of up close smothering Wilder's left side. This fight is there for Luis Ortiz. I don't buy the odds. I don't think Ortiz should even be an underdog, but I get it. He lost the first fight. Right? The trick here is going to be, if it's Ortiz's night, will Ortiz have enough gas left in the tank to take this baby home in the 10th, 11th, and 12th rounds? I hear he's in great shape. He's going to need to be. Because Wilder, as he showed in the Tyson Fury fight, will have KO power for all 12 rounds. Let me also say, too, that the Tyson Fury fight, same thing. Right? Tyson Fury has that fight won by a mile. Then, of course, late in that fight, what was it, round 9 or something like that? There is Tyson Fury on the end of a Wilder right hand. Folks, that should never happen if you understand movement and you have the tools Tyson Fury has. Even with that first knockdown in the Fury fight, Fury has the fight won by a mile in the 12th round. And what's he hit with again? A Wilder right hand up top. Right, folks? Wilder has a left side. He's not that agile on his feet. Right? Understand, Wilder likes to hit you up top. If you bend at the waist and get low, if you go low like Marciano, like Fraser, like Tyson used to crouch, right? If you get into a crouch and you stay away from his right hand, and if you're coordinated enough to throw a jab, and here it should be easy for Ortiz because he's a southpaw. His jab doesn't line up with Wilder's right hand like a righty's jab would. Then you have a legitimate shot. Right? I think Ortiz has waited for this moment his entire life. He's gotten lucky by having the moment twice. Right? He loses to Wilder. Wilder is that kind of champ who doesn't want to be a paper champ. Right? All you have to know about Wilder is that when Joshua ruled the roost, Wilder was ready to fight him. I know the Joshua people disagree and stuff like that. Wilder publicly at one point said, hey, give me 50%. I'll travel to the United Kingdom. Understand, Joshua would have had the fight in his backyard. Wilder was prepared to fight Joshua. At one point, Wilder's people offered Joshua $50 million. Folks, let me just say this. The people behind Wilder are some of the biggest names in boxing. People like Al Heyman. Right? Credibility is very important in business. The folks who think that that offer was somehow illusory are kidding themselves. Big-time promoters with this much at stake, a unified heavyweight title, understand their professional credibility's on the line when they're out in public making $50 million offers. Understand this too about Wilder. You see that Alexander Povetkin is still, even today, an elite heavyweight. Right? Just understand that Deontay Wilder was traveling across the Atlantic to fight Povetkin in Russia. Right? We've seen Povetkin travel to places like the UK to fight fighters, right? David Price, AJ. Right? Wilder was prepared to fight Povetkin in Russia when Povetkin tested positive for meldonium. Right? So Wilder, the reason this fight is happening is because Wilder doesn't want to have any loose ends in his career. So he did not knock out Bermane Stiverne. He beat Stiverne. But like a lot of great athletes, that wasn't enough. Wilder wanted the rematch against Dwyer. Right? He fights Tyson Fury. Didn't lose to Fury officially. That's a draw. He knocks down Fury twice in that fight. Those are the only knockdowns in the fight. Rather than then say, hey, I fought Fury. I fought the lineal. I got a draw with the lineal. Now I'm going to fight these other guys. No, that's not who Wilder is. Wilder has signed to fight Fury in a rematch. Wilder fights Luis Ortiz. Dangerous opponent. Right? Extensive amateur pedigree. You understand, Ortiz is slick and he's a southpaw. Style-wise, this is a nightmare. And he has an excellent jab. Right? He has a bevy of punches. Takes out Brian Jennings throwing uppercuts. Look at that film. Can fight high, can fight low. It's because Wilder knows he was tested in that fight. It's because Wilder knows that if his eyes were cloudy, when the doctor looked in his eyes, he would not be heavyweight champion. It's because Wilder's a guy who needs to tie up that loose thread. The hardest person on Deontay Wilder, in my opinion, is Deontay Wilder. That's why he's fighting Luis Ortiz again. I feel he's making a mistake. I think Ortiz has the blueprint, was operating the blueprint. I think the question here is whether Ortiz has the stamina to make it through the championship rounds. Expect to be entertained in this fight. The bet I'm recommending is the underdog to take the title. This is the second time I'm picking Ortiz against Wilder. That should tell you who I think is the better fighter in the abstract. Hedged with Wilder by KO. Understand, these men are not the same age. Understand, Luis Ortiz has tested positive in the past for taking a PED. I know it's in dispute. I know there are denials everywhere. You Google the testing information for yourself and figure it out. Understand, Luis Ortiz is at least 5 years older than Deontay Wilder. Some people here online believe he's even older than that. Right? The question for me is, after this old man gets the plane down the runway and in the sky, if he's ahead on points at the start of the 8th round, what happens next? Does he have the air in his lungs to challenge the judges to take the title from him on the scorecards? Or does he make a decision at that point that he doesn't have the stamina to take this all the way, and then tries to take out a Deontay Wilder who, by then, he will have hit with several jabs to the body? Right? I like the underdog. I like the plus 400. I'll hedge the play with the champion by KO as I did the first fight. Just understand, this fight is much better than advertised. I personally would not be shocked if the underdog wins here, and if the underdog wins again in the Ruiz-Anthony Joshua fight. I believe we're coming out of an era where muscles, big punches, big height rule the day. And I think we're getting back to an era where it's going to be about angles, right? A fighter crouching, getting his head out of the hot zone of his opponent, right? Fighters smothering the left side of a right-handed KO puncher, right? Guys,
sorry, I'm not sure.
Guys able to set up their KO punches, right? Doing more than just throwing it over your jab or just countering your jab hand. We'll see what happens. That's how I see it. You're getting 4-1 on Ortiz right now. I think it's worth it. I'll hedge it with Wilder by KO. I believe that's the play here, right? Let me know what you consider the play to be. I hope you leave that information in the comment section of this video. Let me also say this too. I am a little bit shaken by the rematch of Wilder against Dwyer. It's clear in that fight Wilder's going for the KO in the first round, even more so than he was against Dominique Brazil. So I get the feeling Wilder is going to try to make a statement, in part because he wants to pub his upcoming fight against Tyson Fury. Right? So I believe Wilder's going to come out, and Wilder's going to be energetic. Wilder's going to go for the early KO. So I don't want to play games. You know, I expect Luis Ortiz to dominate the early rounds, but I don't want to play games with the over-under. So I'm just taking the underdog to win, hedged with the favorite by KO. If you see it differently, let me hear from you in the comment section. Thanks for stopping by.